William didn't fall. He wasn't in pain. He didn't have a fever. But every night he woke up 6 times just to pee. At 75, William Morris was still sharp, kind, and proud. A retired aerospace engineer from Ohio, he spent his mornings fixing clocks and his evenings reading next to his wife of 50 years. He loved quiet. He loved order. But in the past few months, something had changed. His sleep, once deep and steady, had become fragmented. Every 90 minutes he'd wake, shuffle to the bathroom, return, and try to fall asleep again. His wife started waking with him. Their nights were no longer restful. They were interrupted, exhausting, quietly painful. William thought it was just age, something all men eventually deal with. Maybe I just drink too much tea at dinner, he told himself. But one visit to the doctor changed everything. It wasn't the tea. It wasn't just aging. It was the accumulation of small, everyday habits William never realized were affecting his prostate. Things so ordinary, so harmless on the surface that he never thought twice. But together, they created a perfect storm, one that was silently enlarging his prostate, disturbing his sleep, and slowly chipping away at his comfort. Today, we'll walk through the 7 habits that nearly took William's freedom, and how small, simple shifts helped him take it back. If you or someone you love has been waking at night to urinate, feeling pressure, or just brushing off changes as getting older, I invite you to stay until the very end. You'll not only learn what might be happening inside your body, but how to naturally calm, protect, and support your prostate, starting today. Let's begin where it all started for William. A habit he thought was helpful, but turned out to be the first silent trigger of his nightly struggle. William thought he was giving his bladder a break, but instead, he was making it angry. For years, William believed that drinking less water after dinner would help him sleep through the night. And it made sense. Less water meant fewer bathroom trips. Fewer trips meant more rest. But what he didn't realize was that his plan was quietly working against him. You see, when the body doesn't get enough fluid, urine becomes darker, more concentrated. That concentrated urine irritates the delicate lining of the bladder. And just beneath that bladder sits the prostate. Every time the bladder gets stressed, the prostate feels it too. At his age, William didn't feel thirsty often. That's not unusual. Many people over 65 lose the sensation of thirst. By the time the body says, "I need water," it's already mildly dehydrated. William was unknowingly spending his days in a constant state of low hydration. Over time, that led to subtle inflammation, silent, persistent, and dangerous. According to a Mayo Clinic study, prolonged mild dehydration in older men contributes to low-grade inflammation that can slowly enlarge the prostate and worsen urinary symptoms. The very discomfort William was trying to avoid was being made worse by not drinking enough water. The change wasn't dramatic, but it was steady. And then one night, after waking up for the 4th time to urinate, William looked in the mirror and asked himself, "Is this really just age?" That's when he decided to do something different. He started drinking more water, but in small amounts, spread throughout the day. He kept a glass near his reading chair and another in the kitchen. He stopped drinking after 7 p.m. and made it a habit to hydrate more in the morning and early afternoon. Within 2 weeks, his urine turned pale yellow, his bladder felt calmer, and those nighttime awakenings dropped from 6 to 3. It wasn't a miracle. It was water. Simple, steady, and smart. So the next time you think skipping water is helping you sleep, remember William. Your body isn't asking for less. It's asking for balance. But staying hydrated is just one piece of the puzzle. There's another habit William never thought twice about, and it's one many of us do without even realizing the damage it causes. Let's take a closer look. That favorite recliner of yours might be quietly crushing your prostate. After William started drinking more water, his nights slowly improved, but there was still something holding him back. He couldn't quite explain it, but even during the day, he felt a strange heaviness in his lower belly. A pressure. A sense that he wasn't fully emptying his bladder. He thought, "But I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not lifting heavy things or straining myself. And that was exactly the problem. He wasn't doing anything. Like many retired seniors, William spent most of his day sitting. In the mornings, he read the paper in his recliner. After lunch, he watched the news. In the evening, a little TV. Comfortable, yes, but healthy for his prostate. Not at all. When we sit for long hours, especially on soft chairs that sink in, our pelvic area takes on the full weight of the upper body. Blood that should be moving freely begins to pool in the lower region, reducing oxygen and nutrient flow to sensitive tissues like the prostate. Over time, this poor circulation creates the perfect storm for inflammation. Think of it like a river versus a stagnant pond. One flows and nourishes. The other grows murky and toxic. That was William's body, calm on the surface but slowly swelling underneath. Even worse, the muscles that support the bladder and prostate, the pelvic floor, begin to weaken when they're not used. William had started noticing a little dribbling after urinating. He didn't think much of it until he realized he was going back to the bathroom minutes later, still feeling full. That's what happens when those supporting muscles go quiet. They no longer help push urine out fully, leaving behind just enough to irritate the bladder and inflame the prostate. One day, his doctor asked a simple question: "How often do you get up and move?" William couldn't answer. So he started small. He set a timer for every 30 minutes. When it rang, he stood up, took a few steps around the house, stretched his back, and did 5 gentle pelvic floor squeezes. Just a few seconds each. No gym. No sweat. But after 2 weeks, he could already feel the difference. His urgency dropped. The dribbling stopped. And he felt more in control of his body again. Your body doesn't need marathons, it needs motion. A few minutes here and there could be the difference between comfort and constant irritation. But movement isn't the only trigger. In William's case, there was another daily habit he loved, that most of us do too, and it was silently aggravating his prostate every single morning. Let's talk about that next. Every time William held it in, he was stretching his bladder and slowly punishing his prostate. For most of his life, William had a habit. He avoided public restrooms. Whether at the grocery store, the park, or even a friend's house, he preferred to wait until he got home. "I'm fine," he would say, brushing off the mild discomfort. But inside his body, a silent war was building. The longer he held in his urine, the more his bladder stretched. And with each stretch, pressure pushed downward, right onto his prostate. The bladder sits just above the prostate, and when it's overfilled, it doesn't just suffer quietly. It transmits that pressure to the sensitive tissues below. Over time, this can lead to inflammation, irritation, and a gradual enlargement of the prostate gland. It's like blowing up a balloon over and over, then expecting it to return to its original shape. Eventually, it just doesn't bounce back. The muscles get weaker, the signals get fuzzier, and the bladder stops emptying fully. There's clinical evidence to back this up. Studies show that men who urinate fewer than 4 times per day are twice as likely to experience nighttime urination compared to those who go more regularly. That was exactly what William was dealing with: frequent nighttime wake-ups, a heavy feeling in the lower belly, and the constant urge to go even after he just finished. One afternoon at the pharmacy, William found himself shifting uncomfortably in line. He had needed to use the restroom when he first entered but told himself to wait. By the time he got home, the urgency turned painful. That day he realized something simple but profound. Holding it wasn't a sign of strength. It was a slow, daily injury, so he made a new promise to himself. If the urge came, he listened. He didn't wait. He didn't dismiss it. And within weeks, his bladder started to thank him. Less pressure, fewer bathroom trips, and more restful nights. Sometimes the most powerful way to protect your health is to stop ignoring your body's quiet whispers before they become screams. But even listening to your body can't undo what you breathe in. There was another invisible habit in William's life, one that didn't involve food or water but was just as toxic to his prostate. Let's talk about that next. Every morning cup kept William sharp and made his prostate a little more restless. For as long as he could remember, William started each day the same way. A hot cup of black coffee, a slice of toast, and the quiet hum of the morning news. It was his ritual, his comfort, his cue to wake up. But over time, something strange started happening. Just minutes after his first cup, he felt the urge to urinate. Not once, but twice. Sometimes 3 times before breakfast was even done. At first, he didn't think much of it. Coffee is a diuretic after all, but as the days passed, so did his comfort. Caffeine doesn't just increase urine production. It stimulates the muscles that surround the bladder, especially the sphincter that controls flow. When overstimulated, that muscle contracts more frequently, creating urgency, even when the bladder isn't full. For someone like William, who already had a slightly enlarged prostate, that extra pressure made everything worse. His bladder was working overtime and his prostate was caught in the crossfire. Science backs this up. According to a 2013 study in the Journal of Urology, men who consumed more than 2 cups of coffee a day had a 34% higher risk of developing symptoms of overactive bladder, including frequent urination and noxuria. William was drinking 3, sometimes 4, and on colder mornings he'd chase it with a strong black tea in the afternoon. His doctor suggested a gentle change, not to give up his morning joy but to shift toward balance. William kept his first cup, but switched his second to herbal tea made from nettle root, known to support prostate health. He found comfort in chamomile in the evenings, which helped him sleep. He even tried pumpkin seed infusions, something he once scoffed at but now swears by. The difference was subtle but steady. Less urgency, more control, and best of all, fewer late-night interruptions. Sometimes the habits we cherish most need the softest touch to become habits that serve us better. But drinks aren't the only source of irritation. What William ate each day, without a second thought, was also playing a silent role in his discomfort. Let's look at the foods that may be fueling inflammation where you least expect it. William loved his grilled steak with spicy sauce, but he had no idea it was burning up his sleep too. Every Friday night was steak night in the Morris household. It was a tradition William cherished. He'd fire up the grill, brush thick cuts of beef with his signature cayenne glaze, and enjoy every bite with a cold drink and a satisfied grin. But what felt like a reward on his plate was quietly igniting something deeper inside. Over time, William noticed a growing discomfort, an uneasy fullness in his lower belly, more frequent urges to urinate, and a sleep pattern so broken it no longer felt like rest. He never connected the dots between what he loved to eat and how his body was beginning to betray him. Spicy, greasy, and red meat-heavy meals are more than just flavorful. They're inflammatory. Foods rich in saturated fats and hot spices fuel systemic inflammation, which doesn't just affect the gut or the heart. It targets sensitive areas like the prostate too. The capsaicin in peppers, for instance, can irritate the bladder lining, while excess saturated fat triggers an immune response that keeps the body in a state of low-grade inflammation. William's doctor explained it gently. A diet loaded with fried foods and red meats doesn't just increase cholesterol, it increases the likelihood of prostate swelling. And there's real science behind that. Research from Harvard Health shows that adopting a Mediterranean-style diet, rich in leafy greens, tomatoes, olive oil, and fish, can lower the risk of benign prostatic hyperplasia, BPH, by up to 22%. That night, William and his wife sat down and talked. He didn't want to give up flavor, but he also didn't want to keep waking up 5 times a night. So they made a shift. More grilled salmon, more spinach and arugula. Dinners with roasted vegetables drizzled in olive oil. Spices were replaced with turmeric and garlic, not overnight but gradually. And slowly the pressure eased. His bathroom trips lessened. And he finally slept a full 6 hours, something he hadn't done in years. What we eat doesn't just feed us. It fuels or fights the quiet fires within. And choosing wisely doesn't mean giving up joy. It means making joy last longer. But William's story wasn't only about food and drink. There was something else hiding in plain sight, something he'd been carrying quietly for years without ever realizing it. Let's take a look. Your prostate hears every anxious thought you keep inside, and it responds by swelling quietly in return. William was never one to complain. At 75, he still paid his own bills, helped his daughter with errands, and fixed the leaky faucet before anyone even noticed. But as the months passed, he began carrying something heavier than he could fix with a wrench: worry. Worry about rising expenses. Worry about his grandson's future. Worry that he was slowly becoming a burden, even when no one said so. And like many men his age, he kept it all inside. He'd lay awake at night, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling as the clock ticked past 2 a.m. again and again. The body was still, but the mind was running. And his prostate was listening. When stress becomes chronic, the body releases high levels of cortisol, a hormone meant for emergencies but never meant to stay elevated for weeks or months. Elevated cortisol triggers inflammation throughout the body and disrupts hormone balance, especially the ratio between testosterone and estrogen. For the prostate, that imbalance is like pouring fuel on a fire. The tissues swell. The nerves become more sensitive, and even without an infection, the prostate becomes irritated, inflamed, and more prone to enlargement. William had no idea his thoughts could impact his biology. But once his doctor explained it, the pieces fit. The tension in his lower back, the late-night urgency, the exhaustion that no nap could fix. It wasn't just aging. It was a system overloaded by silent emotional weight. So he made space, not just in his schedule but in his mind. 10 minutes each morning became sacred. He sat near the window, placed a hand gently over his belly, and practiced slow, deep breaths. He kept a small notebook where he wrote down one thing he was grateful for and one thing he needed to let go of. Some nights, he played soft jazz or nature sounds before bed. Other times, he simply closed his eyes and allowed himself to just be still. The difference wasn't just in how he felt, it was in how his body responded. Less tension, deeper sleep, fewer flare-ups, and a sense of calm he hadn't known he'd been missing. We often talk about what we eat or drink, but what we carry in our minds may weigh the heaviest on our health. Give your thoughts the care they deserve, and your body just might thank you. But even as William began sleeping better and feeling lighter, there was still one choice he had ignored for years. Not because he was lazy or careless, but because, like many men, he believed if there were no symptoms, there was no problem. Let's talk about that next. William avoided the doctor for 4 years. When he finally went back, the doctor said he was already a year too late. It wasn't out of fear. William simply felt fine. No pain, no bleeding, no dramatic warning signs. So he told himself what many men do. Why go looking for trouble if I'm not feeling anything wrong? But trouble doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes it builds quietly, gently, under the surface, until one day it shows up not as a whisper, but as a crisis. That's exactly what happened during a cold October morning when William found himself unable to urinate at all. The pressure was unbearable. At the ER, the doctor inserted a catheter and ran a few quick tests. The diagnosis: advanced benign prostatic hyperplasia, BPH. His prostate had grown slowly but steadily over the past several years. And the most painful part wasn't the catheter. It was knowing that all of this could have been prevented, or at least caught early, if he had just come in sooner. This isn't rare. In fact, studies show that over 70% of men with BPH don't realize anything is wrong, until it leads to urinary retention, infections, or sudden complications. That's because the prostate doesn't always cause pain when it's growing. Instead, it adapts in silence until the body can't compensate anymore. William's doctor explained that the tools for detection were simple: a PSA blood test, a quick digital rectal exam. Both take minutes, both are often painless, and both could have saved him months of discomfort and fear. Since that day, William made it part of his yearly routine, like getting the oil changed in his truck or cleaning the gutters before winter. It wasn't about being paranoid. It was about being present, about giving himself the gift of early awareness. He now reminds his friends, feeling fine doesn't mean you're in the clear. It just means you still have time to act before it's too late. And time is exactly what your body needs to heal, especially if you've been living with inflammation for years. But while William was learning how to listen to his body, he also started learning how to support it from the inside. Let's talk about how something as simple as food can become medicine when you know what to choose. 3 months after William made his first small change, everything began to shift. He wasn't waking up 6 times a night anymore. Just once, maybe twice, and sometimes not at all. The heaviness in his lower belly was gone. The sharp, anxious urgency he used to feel was replaced by a quiet sense of ease. His days felt calmer, his sleep deeper. His wife said it best one morning as they shared coffee on the porch. "You're back." But the truth is, William never really left. He had simply been buried under years of habits that no longer served him. And by gently peeling them away, one by one, he allowed his body to do what it was designed to do: heal. It didn't take medicine, it took mindfulness. He didn't change everything overnight. He just began paying attention, drinking more water, moving more, listening when his body whispered, and that made all the difference. Because the prostate doesn't scream, it swells. And if we're not listening, it's easy to miss the warning signs until they interrupt everything that matters. So, if there's one thing to take away from William's journey, it's this. Nothing is too small to matter. Every cup of water, every deep breath, every decision to get up and move. Each one is a drop, and the prostate is the glass. You get to decide whether that glass stays calm or quietly overflows. If you have a father, a brother, or maybe it's you, carrying the same silent struggles William once did, please share this video. Because no one should have to suffer in silence. Not when peace, rest, and healing are still within reach. Sometimes the only thing standing between a restless night and a restful one is knowledge, and the willingness to begin. Let today be that beginning.